Greetings all. Today is a fairly simple one, but an effective one I feel, as I turn a Stormcast Lord Imperatant into an Inquisitor. I took inspiration for this from the old Inquisitor Coteaz model, as if you squint really hard, they are fairly similar, and the Imperatant's fancy armour and cloak lend themselves rather well to a member of the God Emperor's most holy Inquisition. So let's begin. The first thing I'm going to change is the knee pad on his right leg. The Imperatant has an eagle here, but going from the old Coteaz model, I'm going to replace it with a skull from the Citadel Skulls kit. It won't fit as it is, however, but we can fix that by snipping off the back end of it with some clippers. With that done, some green stuff putty can be mixed up and added to the space where the knee should be to bulk it out before squishing the skull into place so it sits nicely. The putty can then be shaped around this to form the knee pad. Giving this a little time aside to set, I'm going to use my knife to remove the gem on the sheath of his little sword here. Whilst it would probably be okay to keep it, I plan on flattening this bit out so that I can paint a nice Inquisition symbol on it later on. Assuming I can actually paint one, that is. Speaking of nice smooth areas for painting, I'm going to do similar with the cloak pin thing, taking some putty and squishing it into the symbol on the front of it, as it will be easier to file it nice and flat later. I did toy with the idea of making it domed and painting it as a gem, but another Inquisition symbol seemed a bit easier, and the armour is going to be fancy enough for my liking without a giant gem on it. Whilst that putty sets, I'm going to work on the right arm. I'm going to use this bolt pistol hand from the Chaos Space Marine left over from my possessed Kitbash. I did have another bolt pistol from the Tactical Marines kit that I thought of using, but I kind of like the older look of this one with the exposed ammo belt. It gives it a bit more of an heirloom feel, and with a little editing, definitely a prized weapon an Inquisitor would have access to. But it would need those spikes removed first, and a quick trim to the pointier teeth to make it look more heirloom than heretical. I also decided to take off the pointy bits on the gauntlet's trim with my knife, as they didn't really fit with the rest of the armour, I felt. With the pistol less heretical, I can work on removing the rod hand from the right arm. As I have the whole gauntlet, I'm going to take the arm off just below the elbow, and even though the part is kind of thick, I'm going to use my knife for this instead of a saw, as I would like to keep the rod bit intact, and sawing would likely result in damaging it. Once it is off, it can then be cleaned up, and if you need to adjust the angle of the join, you can compare and adjust here. Once that has been done, some glue can be added to attach the pistol hand to the arm and the body halves can be joined together. This skirt bit around the joint area can benefit from a little extra glue added to the front of it to help smooth it out a little. For his head, I'm going to be using this one from the Van Saar Necromunda gang, but before I do, it will need some trimming to the part where a ponytail would normally attach to it, as I'm going for a bald-headed look. After taking the raised ponytail socket off with my knife, I could add a little putty in there just to fill up the hole. To fit this head, I would need to build a neck. Again, a small ball of green stuff can be used for this, pushing the head slightly into it before taking some sculpting tools and shaping it into a vaguely convincing neck. It doesn't have to be entirely perfect here, as the cloak will cover up a lot of it. And once that has been done, I can then leave it overnight to set. And here we are the next day, using a file to flatten out that cloak pin. I also filed around the back of the head where the putty was, and then trimmed the neck a little with my knife to remove some excess. Once satisfied with this, I decided to whip out the green stuff again for the mace held in his left hand. Now, I had originally intended to remove this weapon and use a thunder hammer to represent the demon hammer that Coteaz has, but I decided instead to keep the one the model comes with a few alterations. I started by putting a layer of green stuff on either side of the hammer, carefully sculpting it to the shape of the weapon and adding some rivet holes at the corners. This would cover up the Sigmar symbols quite nicely. With the sides sorted, I added a layer to the hammer's face, taking care not to squish the sides that were still pliable. It might have been a good idea to do this yesterday, huh? Oh well, hindsight is everything. Once I had a nice layer on the hammer's face, I took my knife and a cocktail stick and made an inquisitorial symbol, or at least a very close approximation. Once that is good and done, the next step was to assemble the parts of the miniature with some plastic glue. None of the adjustments that had been done really get in the way of this process, which was handy. And once that is done, he is nearly readied. I just need to add a few relics and a few bits to adorn his armour with, and here I have a selection. The grenades from the Van Saar kit, and the purity seals and the bullet from the heavy intercessors. However, I did decide to omit the purity seals, as he does already have one, and he's quite fancy as it is. The bullet I glued in place just below the cloak clip, and the grenades I glued in place just on his waist. Not sure if the Inquisitor datasheet has grenades, but it seems like something that one is likely to have to hand. And with that, I'm going to bring this one to a close. And here he is, all painted up. I went with a nice gold for his armour, as the Coteaz model has similar, and made the cloth purple, as doing it blue would look very Stormcast, and I wasn't feeling in a red mood that day. Now, it is important to note here that he appears to have suffered some battle damage since the Kitbash was finished. For this effect, I left him on my painting table for a moment to get a drink, thus giving my cat the opportunity to knock him on the floor, giving a slightly battered look to his halo. Can't say I recommend this step. I shall endeavour to avoid it for future Kitbashes. On a slightly more sensible note, it is a fairly simple Kitbash really, with only a few changes to the base model, but I think it works nicely for an Inquisitor. I am planning on running him using Coteaz's datasheet, although that fella is armed with an eagle, which is something that I did not add. There are actually quite a few birds that could work for it if you wanted to use one. I think the ether wings from the Stormcast Eternals will work quite well, and there's a Tzeentch Troops choice that has a bird in it, but as I had neither to hand, mine is minus the birdie for now. With that, I would like to say a big thank you for watching. As always, give it a like if you enjoyed it, and if you aren't subscribed, consider doing so, and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe and have a good one all.